The small lake stood clear, unbroken, pristine. It reflected the night into a glittering obsidian mirror, almost darker than the night about it. The spring that fed the pool rested too deep for its continual presence to affect the surface. Only at the mouth of the pool did the eternal motion of the water become visible. There the waters were channeled into a gently laughing brook that eventually fell off the relatively small cliff to join the vast depths hundreds of feet below. There were few signs of civilization in the area, a small collection of weapons, only what one warrior might carry with them, and wax-sealed camping supplies leaning against a rock where were the only things visible. It was not until a wet, red-maned head rose out of the water almost seamlessly that it was made clear who owned these tools. The breaking of the surface seemed hardly to be noticed beyond a finger's length from the bather. It was almost as if she were being formed out of the water rather than displacing it. The traveler shook back her shoulder-length hair and flicked it once as a further encouragement to try. Even in the shrouding darkness of the mountainous trees that towered over all in the Greenwater, her hair seemed to be a bright flame that caught, focused, and reflected all light in the vicinity. In comparison, her athletic body, hidden from the waist down by the black water, seemed a pale light that gleamed a gold that was almost white. She bent down reverently, arms cupped together, as she collected a large handful of water, whispering a soft stream of words before washing her face in an apparent ritual. The bather's hands spread out to their span, her face remaining quiet and peaceful. Then they circled out again as she arched her back before reaching down to cup another handful of water. It was the end of another 10 days. She had spent the day seeking out this lake or something similar that would serve the same purpose. Now she intended to spend the night in the cleansing, cleaning her body, calming her mind, centering her spirit, and focusing her being on the path of her duty. She had been so long on her own that she began to fear that her cleansing was more about an extra long bath and timekeeping than actual prayer. It was said that everyone had their faith tested eventually. She had begun to think that perhaps the long exile was hers. For all she knew, she had already failed in her duty. More than 400 days ago, the clerics of her village had deemed that some threat was facing the Greenwater, an ancient threat that had to be stopped lest the ancient ages of tyranny and empire return. She had been the first to volunteer, swearing an oath before Duinlug to defend the folk, the Malana, and all the free peoples. She had not left alone. One brother and 2 sisters had traveled with her. Besides her family, there had been a weaver and a blood witch, 2 males of her race, Ramatan, and 4 females, Ligiel. It had been almost funny at first. Unless war was about, Ligiel usually stayed at home to defend the village. The Ramatan were usually the explorers, the emissaries. The fact that this band had more Ligiel than Ramatan while it was meant to travel so far was bizarre, and the only information they had were the description of a few dreams and one of the old proverbs. The threat of the future lay in the history of the present. She hadn't considered, when she volunteered, the fact that she had never been more than a day beyond the village before in her life. And now, here she was, lost in the trackless depths of the Greenwater, her comrades lost to misfortune and the waters. No more than a month out, and they had encountered one of the Greenwater snakes, spawn of that one great serpent that had roamed the water since the age of dragons. If even Valasir had survived, he would have found a path. She harshly returned her thoughts back to the cleansing. Now was not the time to think of the past, but how to forge into the future. She would mourn another day. There was a ritual for that as well. Man, a voice hissed disdainfully. The Ligiel paused as she heard the word. It was a corruption of what the Malana, the race that dominated the settled portions of the Greenwater, called the folk. Or rather, it was the word a race with a related tongue used to name the same race. Ranita, she smiled quietly as she turned about toward the speaker. Civilization, hopefully friendly civilization. Ranita lizard people were sprinkled in clans about the green water. The greatest number were settled in the southern realm of Ratadoni, though she hoped she had not encountered them. Have I reached Malanador? She paused to correct herself from using her people's name of the realm. The realms of the Malana? The Malana had no name for their kingdom, claimed they had no kingdom in fact. Each house was a government of their own. Still, the alliances and goodwill between houses were widespread and they were mostly unified, especially in the last 40 years, since the most respected house acquired a new head. She looked over the group that had found her. There were 12 of the Ranita, each appearing like two-legged lizards. They were large, broad-shouldered, and strong. Many would be stronger than her despite her training. They were also, however, young and untrained. They probably hadn't been in more than a couple of skirmishes, not like her fallen comrades who had sortied out from their village to battle the invading sea demons with honor, and not like her who had been trained since her earliest age and spent the past seasons in a state of near constant alertness. They stood at least 2 heads taller than most folk, with glittering green and black scales meshing together into a reflective coat of hard armor. The majority of the weapons were Ranita craft. She could tell from where she was. They were heavy war machetes equally useful in cutting a path or an enemy. Other than that, each of the creatures wore a short bow. Only the Ranita in the center bore different gear. His gear was cleaner, better, the blade was slimmer, brighter in the darkness than that of the others. She frowned at that, uncertain as to why a Ranita would be using a weapon so concerned with finesse over their own favored machetes. The Malana used such swords, though theirs were shorter and better suited to close fighting than the blade this Ranita carried. Over their scales they wore some sort of leather armor, shark or crocodile probably. There were a few other creatures in the green water with tougher skin that were still relatively easy to kill. A slim tabard was worn over the armor of the Ranita, a green dragon rearing back with wings outstretched to strike, the crest of the ruling clan of Ratadoni. She frowned deeper. Of all the civilized regions of the green water she could have wandered into, Ratadoni. Anything was a leftover of the old times the rulers of this realm were. Arrogant, intolerant, tyrannical in the extreme. They were a threat, maybe not the threat, but still a threat. It was her duty to ensure none of them passed her alive. At least, she knew she was near one of the great mesas now. Man, die! One of the warriors shouted in the folk tongue. He was obviously the leader and making an effort to inform the man just what was about to happen. Come on, then, she called out, saving her confusion for later. She frowned at allowing herself to be distracted before battle like that. The Ligio glided backwards in the pool, moving far more smoothly than her attacker was. On the shore, the lizard-like Ranita were putting bows to use and taking shots at her. She dodged around the arrows, twisting and weaving in manners that her closest attacker deemed should have been impossible, especially as he found himself having to swim as he approached her. Then he got close enough for his own night vision to pierce the nearly impenetrable water. The Ranita leader had only a brief mental flash of what he had attacked, when his target glided forward with blinding speed to meet him. And then he was pulled under the water. The archers on the shore ceased fire as their leader closed, fearful of hitting him. One of them moved forward to squint in the darkness. Something was wrong. Then their officer and the female vanished under the water in a blink. They watched the pristine surface of the lake, waiting for sign of their captain coming back with the ugly man-female. They were thus looking much too far out into the lake. The man broke the surface of the water no more than a lazy toss away and quickly slid up the shore into the midst of her attackers. What was hidden under the water before was now clearly apparent to the shocked Ranita. The bather appeared almost as a folk or Moranu, the scaleless cousins to the Malana, down to her waist. Below that was the lithe, slender body of a ruby-scaled serpent. I am Runya Sulamar, she said, speaking in a cool, calm tone, as much a ritual as her prayers in the water. but with a definite trace of hostility. "Come with me to the razor's edge. We'll choose our fates with another dance." Striding the river red.